Kenny Mapanga joins us now from the National Election House. I think I got that name right, Kenny. Hello, great to see you again. Give us the gist of what came out there. Are those good numbers for the first day? What's the time now? 12:30.
Well, good afternoon to you, Chris. Indeed, we're still live at the headquarters of the IEC here in Centurion, where we found out that by 11:30, 90% of the voting stations had opened. We understand that the 10%, it may have been due to service delivery concerns in those areas. However, the IEC has chosen not to profile those areas that had some of those concerns and couldn't open those voting stations in time. Indeed, you've correctly stated, just over 300,000 voters have physically visited their stations and been processed by 11:30. We understand that those numbers continue to grow as we get to the next hour. Then, of course, 26,000 had registered on the online portal. When we spoke to the IEC about the breakdown of some of those voters they've spoken about earlier today, of course, that breakdown will be given at the next briefing that they decide to host here at the headquarters. But I think what we're most curious about, Griselda, is whether new voters have showed up to those polls to register and get themselves on the voters' poll ahead of the 2024 elections. To elaborate further on whether these numbers are good and whether we are seeing new voters on this system, we are joined by IEC Commissioner Ms. Janet Love, that has been with the IEC for a number of years, understands these voting patterns of the country, and can speak to us further. Of course, one of the biggest goals, Ms. Janet Love, is getting that youth, that specific group, onto this voters' roll to ensure that that constitutional right to vote is achieved in 2024. What can you tell us from these figures that we've heard earlier today?
Look, as you've already said, we are going to be able to give you the breakdown, which will give you detail as to which are new registrations, which are people who've moved, who's just checking, and obviously what the demographic is. We'll only really be able to give you a proper report of that after the voter registration weekend. We'll try and give you some updated numbers tomorrow. But we have seen younger people moving around. Many of them actually have been, because they're seeing pamphlets and posters and some of the IEC signage, they've been asking, can't they do it online? How can they do it online? You know, and so there have been I think there's also been an increase in our call center, in our SMS take-in. Many of those are from young people. I've just done a tour of some of the voting stations in Gauteng, particularly in the area of Sophia Town, West End, near the campus of the University of Johannesburg. There were certainly a number of younger people who were moving towards the voting stations. I was there, right at the beginning of the process. And in Alex, there were a number of younger people who were coming to the stations. I don't think that we've reached anywhere near what we want to reach. So we really are urging young people to come out in their numbers, to convince their friends, to convince their fellow students especially.
Now, of course, Ms. Love, I've had the pleasure of utilizing the online voter system, and that has been quite a seamless and quick process. One would have expected larger numbers. One wouldn't have expected that the physical voters would have been larger, quite much larger than the 20-something thousand that had showed up on the online voter poll. Is there not enough education around this system? Is it not as easy for people to access? What are the concerns around this online voter registration poll?
I'm sure that there can be also even further publicity around numbers to dial and what is the online process. But I think some of it is also because people are worried about their data. Data is very precious. And of course, that's one of the reasons why the registration weekends are what we regard as an equalizing process. So whether you're somebody who's just not comfortable or you're somebody who doesn't want to spend your data doing something like this, the stations are open. The queues are not onerous. People are not having to wait in long queues, but they can register. So I think it is partly that we can do even more with your support about the numbers. But I do think that there is a large number of young people who just don't want to spend their data on something like that. And I think, as you know, we have been in discussions to try and do the zero rating, and hopefully those will progress. But in the meanwhile, this is one of our ways of equalizing the opportunities.
And then, of course, there was a very important question raised about homeless persons and their right to vote. Of course, it was stated again, the requirements do require that you are a citizen and that you have a valid, identity document to present at the voting station. Of course, we understand that there may be barriers to that for homeless persons who may not be able to acquire that required documentation. And are you looking at a scenario where they could possibly be excluded from the 2024 elections?
Look, we have to comply, as you can imagine, with the constitutional requirements, which require that proof of citizenship because it is a point of departure. We have had assurances from the Department of Home Affairs that as of now they will be working really to try and improve their systems, to extend their hours, as they have done last weekend and this weekend. But I'm sure also in terms of improving the efficiency of their systems to ensure that people who do apply are able to be issued even with the temporary IDs. And we will continue to be engaging with them once everybody's done an assessment of this weekend.
Thank you very much. That was IEC Commissioner Ms. Janet Love giving us the latest update. Well, of course, the numbers continue. We have close to 400,000 that have jointly visited the physical stations as well as visited the online poll. South Africans are continuing to encouraged to head to those voter polls or visit their online system until 5 p.m. today, as well as the second day of voter registration weekend, with voting stations opening at 8 a.m. and closing at 5 p.m. Over to you in studio, Chris.